at various times during this. It's extremely unfortunate that the people of Gaza have been under this military blockade. One thing that we should be very clear about is that in 2005, Israel withdrew its settlers and its military from the Gaza Strip. This does not mean that the Gaza Strip is now free and independent. It is still occupied territory. It's been converted from a place that has settlers and military inside to basically a big open-air prison where all of the guards are outside. That's the reality of it. The Palestinians don't have control over their land, they don't have control over their borders, they don't have control over their sea or their airspace. Israel constantly is violating the airspace over the Gaza Strip and the West Bank as well, and southern Lebanon, all of these places. It's prevented Palestinians from fishing. There's no natural resources in the Gaza Strip, and one of the available sources of protein is fish, because the Mediterranean Sea is right there. But the Palestinians can't fish in the Mediterranean Sea. You'll notice that Israel constantly cuts off the supply of electricity. And electricity is important for a number of things. One of those is the treatment of sewage. When you have no electricity, you end up pumping raw sewage into the Mediterranean. And if you're only allowed a couple of nautical miles for fishing, all of that water in which you can fish is polluted. So you're not going to catch any fish there. And the areas that aren't polluted, the Israelis patrol, and they will shoot any Palestinian fishing boat that attempts to catch fish in those waters there. So the Gaza Strip is still completely occupied. The only outlet, the only border they have is with Egypt. But unfortunately, the Egyptian government has been so weak, and they have not supported their fellow Muslims, brothers, sisters and children, allowing them to have, an outlet and a place through which food and supplies and things that every society needs can come through. So it's very sad. It's disgusting. It's shameful, really. The lack of courage that any Arab nation has had to support this issue. And you're right. There have been reports like this, unfortunately. Yeah. Sorry. The history of Palestine says that it's the people inside never achieve. The history of Palestine is that it's been inhabited by many different people over time, and it's been ruled by many different people. The people who have ruled the second longest are the Egyptians, 1,150 years. The people who have ruled the longest are the Muslims. Over 1,200 years of Muslim rule, only interrupted between 1099 and 1187 by the Crusades, taken back by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi from outside. Then again the Crusaders ruled from 1224 until 1244. But apart from these periods, 1,200 years of continuous Muslim rule. So if anyone is to make the argument about ancient title, who's ruled there the longest? Definitely it's the Muslims. The Arab and Turkish Muslims combined, 1,200 years. They talk about the Kingdom of David and Solomon. Kingdom of David and Solomon, read your history books, 73 years. 927 until 1000 BC, that's it. So if the Israelis want to go down the line of ancient title, they haven't got a chance against the Muslims. The Muslims have consistently ruled Palestine for 1,200 years. But what you're saying is correct. History shows us it's only ever been liberated from outside. Yeah. Yes, there's another masjid underneath Masjid al-Aqsa. It's another part of Masjid al-Aqsa. You can go underneath there and see it. There are cracks in the ceiling, and this is because if you go in the front of Masjid al-Aqsa, there's a large drop-off, and there's massive amount of excavations that the Israelis are doing in front of Masjid al-Aqsa on the other side. It's outside of the walls of the Haram, you could say. They're doing all of this excavation under there, which is weakening the foundations of Masjid al-Aqsa. You can see the cracks for yourself. I've seen them. Yes. Sorry? Well, I suppose that the argument would be that, oh well, whoops, sorry about that. It just collapsed. We didn't destroy it. It just collapsed. There's a very strong movement in Israel from the right wing. The right wing, very ultra-Orthodox people, Jewish people, they are outnumbering in terms of birth rate, 7-1, the secular people. And they make a very strong drive for the destruction of Masjid al-Aqsa and the destruction of the Dome of the Rock to build what they call the third temple. First one was destroyed by the Babylonians and then the Romans, and they want to build the third one now, on the site where the two mosques are standing today. So this is an important issue as well. Yeah.
Why should we resort to international law or UN resolutions when international law recognizes Israel's right to exist?
Does it?
Doesn't it? Because they accept the division of the land when Israel comes down, but we don't accept it.
International law recognises the state of Israel, that's correct. I mean, if we talk about the United Nations, the General Assembly and then the Security Council, but there's some clauses in there that we could have a further discussion about. But one of the things international law talks about very clearly is the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by force. Okay, I'll explain that. Basically what that means is if you conquer territory, you capture territory through the use of armed force, that acquisition or your control over that territory is inadmissible. It's illegal. That is a very important clause when we look at the Israel-Palestine issue. Because while they may be able to argue that 55% of their land was allocated by the United Nations, although General Assembly resolutions don't have the authority that a Security Council resolution have, and this one is only a General Assembly resolution, they may have a claim to 55%. They don't have a claim to 78% because that extra 23% was taken through the use of armed force, which is inadmissible according to international law. The reality is that many of these things are now a foregone conclusion. All right? So the reason why we need to look to international law is to start to get back some measure of justice. It has to be step by step. The first thing is you can use international law to say that all the settlements are illegal and must be dismantled. That's black and white. That Jerusalem is not the property of Israel. It is illegally occupied by Israel. That the territory Israel captured through the use of force is inadmissible. All of these things I think is a constructive way to approach the conflict. We've already made it very clear that there isn't going to be any Arab army that is going to bring about this through, external force or anything like that. International law is a very constructive way of approaching this conflict because Western powers have to listen to international law. Even when countries violate international law, they try and justify what they do on the basis of law. This is how important international law is to them. So I think it provides a very constructive way of approaching this issue. Yeah.
Do you really think that one day the Palestinians will get the land back by these resolutions?
Well, did anybody ever think that there would be a black president of the United States? If you were living in the 1960s, you would have said, no way, that will never happen. Did anyone ever think that South Africa would see majority rule, that the black people would have their rights back in that country? You were living in South Africa, prior to the 1990s, you would have said, no way, this is never going to happen. This regime is too powerful, too embedded, too supported by the West, it can't happen. I'll tell you why it did happen though. It didn't happen because of any military or economic or any other strategic power. It happened because of norms and identity factors. And the same thing could happen in the situation of Palestine if we approach the conflict in the right way. But I'll talk about South Africa just briefly. The Imam's from South Africa, so knows what I'm talking about. No military came in and gave the black people their rights and removed the national party in South Africa. That didn't happen. What happened was you had human beings all around the world that spoke about one concept, and that was racial equality. That's all they talked about. They talked about it for decades. From the 1960s, you had the first resolutions passed, and in fact India was the country that put that on the table at the United Nations because they were concerned about the plight of the Indian people in South Africa. And so they put it on the table. Eventually you had the United Nations pass resolutions talking about sanctions, this and that. But nothing fundamentally changed because two countries held out, the United States and Britain. What made the United States and Britain go along with the rest of the world and put sanctions on South Africa that eventually led to the collapse of the National Party in South Africa and the end of apartheid? What was it? It was norms, international norms and identity factors. No country, no political leader, domestically or internationally, could tolerate the image of being called a racist. It was intolerable, domestically and internationally. You could not stand for that.